It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders on this Monday. Alan, how are we feeling?
Tired.
Yeah, I was actually very impressed, by the way, the morning rush that was put out, the time that it was put out. Wasn't sure what to expect this morning, but good stuff over there. So I hope everybody watched or listened to that. But I expected that answer actually from you. But yeah, we're going to get into a lot of stuff. The first thing that I want to say, Alan, is I always tell people, never apologize for how you feel. You never know how your emotions are going to be. I didn't know how I was going to be feeling one day after this game, after this loss against Philly. I was hoping that I wouldn't feel too bad because I kind of like had myself prepared for that being the case, the way things would go. And I didn't think that it was going to tell the story of the 2024 Steelers if they lost that one. And I don't feel so bad. So I don't know if this is really even feeling like a normal misery Monday for me, despite the loss yesterday.
We need a new term.
Yeah.
Because it's, I think here's my sort of like big picture takeaway for this game is that this was a balloon popper for people that were in dream world about this team. But if you weren't, it's not a big deal.
Okay. Yeah, so if you felt like they were legit Super Bowl contenders in that same class as Buffalo, Kansas City, Detroit, Philly, obviously, then maybe but if you felt like they were a playoff team, like a very comfortable playoff team, maybe in that second tier, then you should still be feeling the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's I
have a take that I don't know if I want to put out right now because we're going to see this team on Christmas Day.
Let's make with the take. If it's about the Chiefs, there's like 1,000 Chiefs things we can talk about today. So,
yeah, I don't think that they're with the other three teams that I mentioned there. I think there has to be a de facto fourth team because somebody has played Buffalo in the AFC Championship, but I don't think that they're nearly as good as those other three teams.
Well, I mean, with Patrick Mahomes hurt, I might agree with you. Suffered a high ankle sprain against the Cleveland Browns. I mean, I don't know how we're talking about a high ankle sprain and him playing this week. Like, that's just like crazy talk to me. He's out this week.
Look what happened with Justin Herbert.
I'll say it if the Chiefs won't say it. Like, he's not going to play this week. They could very easily lose to the Houston Texans with Carson Wentz. It sort of opens the door for Buffalo to win the 1 seed. But like, I don't know. I've said on here before that I think people are taking the Chiefs lightly because I think they've been on cruise control for a long time now, and I don't think but him being hurt makes a huge difference, like a huge difference. Like it might be the single biggest drop from starter to replacement player of any position for any team in the league.
And
that's Carson Wentz is incompetent, but it just, you either have that guy or you don't, and he's such a difference maker.
Right, and he's why I think it's even like a conversation. Like, obviously the recent success that they've had, but you just kind of keep waiting or expecting that when they have to turn it on because of who they have, they're going to turn it on, and that very well could happen in the playoffs. But it's, to your point, with cruise control, that's been that way the entire season, and they just don't look like the same team. Will they, once they get to the playoffs, do they potentially get Hollywood Brown back in the mix right before, and then all of a sudden he adds an element that they don't have to the offense right now, potentially? I don't know, but I think that when I look at those other three teams, I don't think Kansas City's on that level right now. By the time that we're talking in the postseason, they certainly could look like they are.
Yeah, I'm going to put them there until they're not. It's just,
fair. That's fair.
I think they deserve that as the 2-time champs and the best team of the last decade.
I want to ask you something, and this might be a weird way to bring this up because it wasn't necessarily how I was planning to do so, but we got to talk about the Diontae Johnson situation a bit more.
Just have it. Let's just go. Just go.
We got to talk about the Diontae Johnson situation a bit more, and him and the Ravens basically mutually agreeing for him to not participate this week. I see a lot of people saying like, okay, once they get past this game with the Steelers, then they're going to release him. But I'm just wondering, like, is it more beneficial for them to just basically hold him hostage on that team as opposed to letting him go and potentially being picked up by a Buffalo or Kansas City, another playoff team that's even Houston with the injuries they've had to like Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell. Like, what's your take on that and just the whole situation that's become very odd with Diontae Johnson in Baltimore?
Well, my take on that is sure, it's a lot better for the Baltimore Ravens to do that, but they can't do that unless he agrees to it. You can't tell a player he's not allowed to practice.
I just mean like healthy scratch him and like keep him on the roster in some capacity, not necessarily holding him out from practice and stuff like that.
Yeah, they can have him take up a roster spot, but he has to be allowed to practice. They can't keep him from practice and not suspend him and have him on the roster, which is why the wording of today's statement from the Baltimore Ravens was that the Ravens and Diontae Johnson have agreed that he will not participate this week. To me, that's untenable going forward. I don't see how that continues. To me, this screams that the Ravens are just trying to get past the Steelers and then they're going to cut him. I mean, think about the Steelers roster and like the decisions they've had to make about the roster moves this time of year, how crunched things get with other injuries. Are you really going to keep Diontae Johnson around because he might give you a 5th round comp pick next year? Like, I don't know. I don't. And then have him like be at practice every day, knowing you're not going to play him, being miserable. I don't know. This sounds like there was an okay, I'll do this for 1 week. You still pay me. I'll go away then after that kind of agreement. I don't know that for sure, but that's sure what it sounds like to me.
So what does that look like going forward to you? I mean, if that is what happens, how do you think the rest of Diontae Johnson's 2024 plays out? Just for the Ravens.
If they cut him, he'll sign. I mean, he's a good player. He'd be the best receiver on the Steelers right now with George Pickens hurt. They should absolutely want him back. I don't know if they will. I know they had character concerns and they gave him away for a reason. And obviously, like, things didn't go well in Carolina. I don't know why things aren't going well in Baltimore. Like, I don't think it's ever been communicated. Like, what is Diontae's agent doing? Can I like speak on like where is the communication about like, oh, my player has a legitimate beef, or here's the concern, or here's my side of the story, or like none of it. I don't know. Like, is he just losing it? I have not heard anyone like say like what he's upset about, why he didn't want to go into the game. How does that happen and 2 weeks go by and we just never find out why? That's the like a player upset with a team is not strange to me. The fact that we're getting like zero communication about this from the player's side of things is very strange, and I don't understand that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's all kind of weird.
I am pumped to not see any mention of this on Hard Knocks on Tuesday.
Well, you can be pretty sure you're not going to.
I mean, based off last week, once you brought that up to me, I was like, wow, yeah, it's pretty eye-opening. But to your point with like the Steelers, like you're the one that brought this up to me because I knew how things had gone for Diontae Johnson. Obviously, the organization wanted to move on from the person more so than the player. Obviously, very productive on the field. But, you know, you were pretty confident in saying that you felt like that was a Tomlin thing. So it's just hard for me to see a path towards them bringing him back, even with what he could bring to the football team.
Yeah, I mean, here I agree. I don't know. So I guess, you know, I think that part of the Diontae Johnson equation was trying to figure out if like separating him from George Pickens made a difference, right? That they had a decision to make about Pickens' contract. They wanted to see what he, you know, was like without him. Having seen that now, do they say, oh, maybe Diontae wasn't so bad? You know, like I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. And again, I understand what the lack of production that he's had because he hasn't played in Baltimore. Was still, you know, I thought from a number standpoint doing okay in Carolina. I still think he's a good player. And to your point with how desperate they are at receiver, in addition, certainly could still be on the radar. Speaking of that, Odell Beckham Jr., name that we brought up last week, cleared waivers, can sign with anybody now at this point. Of course, because of the position he plays, the Steelers are going to be among the favorites to sign. But, just do you think that that's potentially a match too? Again, taking into consideration more than just what you'd be getting on the field.
I mean, at some point, what's on the field has to matter more. Like, they're in a bad situation. I mean, I haven't rewatched this game, but my take from the press box was there was not very much separation happening in the back end for the Pittsburgh Steelers against the Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, the Eagles have a very good defense, a very good secondary. They're number one in the league in pass defense for a reason. But I don't know how many more games you can get by like that. And this is a hamstring injury. It's December. Like, look outside at whatever weather is outside your window right now, unless you're one of our Steelers fans that is like joining us from Miami or Arizona. Like, this is hamstring killing weather right here. Like, you got to prepare for the possibility that you got to win a playoff game with George Pickens. Do you feel good enough about the wide receiver room to do that right now?
Yeah, I don't know.
My answer is no. I do not.
Yeah.
So, however you got to fix it, even if you got to do some things you don't want to do, whether it becomes problem children of your own accord or other people's, you got to find a way.
Yeah, I'll be honest. To your point about the lack of separation, definitely, I watched some of this game back, not the entirety of it. But you look at like some of their best plays; they were with zero window. Like there's nothing there, and Russ fits it in. The touchdown pass to Freiermuth is just him kind of plucking it away. Just very strong hands on it. The flea flicker pass to Calvin Austin. There's no window there. I mean, there was no separation for most of this day. The most separation that we saw, I think, was on the Ben Skoranek crosser. Like that is basically the only time that I saw that it was just like clear cut. There's an easy throw. There's a layup for Russ right there. It wasn't to be had on Sunday.
Yeah. And again, some credit to the Eagles defense, but
sure.
There's not enough there. We've known there's not enough there. It's not like this was some secret, some hiding feature. We've been talking about this since March. Like, what would happen if the Steelers lost George Pickens? I mean,
and unfortunately, we saw it come to fruition.
Yeah, like I mean, this has been a known problem, and I want to address like the Mike Williams questions that I know are coming before. Like I get like he was out there, man. He's not getting open. Like he does one thing pretty well. You maybe want to do that one thing 4 or 5 times a game. Outside of those 4 or 5 times, he's not proving to be very useful. Like
yeah. So I guess the question becomes like, absent of separation, do you just throw it and give guys shots? Do you, like just say not?
I mean, there's a couple of plays there where Russ probably should have done that, right? The sack he takes, I was like a 2nd and 10, and then it made it 3rd and 20, and they ended up settling for a field goal. Like that play, yeah, probably should have just given somebody a chance to make a play. But in general, like don't turn the ball over. Just like there's people complaining like, oh, the Steelers run on 2nd and 10 too much. Do you see who's running routes? They should run on all the 1, 2, 3s and 1 through 10s like that. Like, what do you want them to do?
Yeah, I've
actually,
seen more.
Also, I looked this up because somebody complained about that last night. They have the numbers. They had 11 second and longs yesterday, and they ran 3 of them, which feels like a perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, I'm actually a bit surprised by that, to know that. But good context to add for sure. Talking about George Pickens in there's a whole group of players to talk about in terms of the injuries. Will they be able to get back on Saturday, not Sunday? Short week this week. George Pickens, DeShon Elliott, Larry Ogunjobi, Donte Jackson, Justin Fields, TJ Watt, all dealing with injuries. Mike Tomlin spoke today. I think it was your post I saw specifically listed TJ as questionable, like specifically said that attached to his name. Just going down the line there, what's your take on any of these, if you have any, this early in the week?
I mean, I guess it's good news that nobody's been ruled out. But
Yeah,
also,
there you
like,
go.
if they were ruled out, would he say so? Like, that's the other part about the, like, kind of, I don't know. We'll see. I don't feel like we learned anything about the Steelers' injuries today, other than I
Okay.
guess, like, if
Do you
TJ
think
had
that you would have? I was curious about this. Do you think that you would have if Tomlin's day wasn't pushed up? Like, do you think if it was tomorrow, potentially you would have, or no, it'd still be the same way?
no,
Okay.
no, I don't. I mean, no, maybe no, probably not. I mean, maybe a little bit of more like sometimes he'll go into a little bit more detail about who is and is not scheduled to practice the next day. And I would just imagine like it being the day after a game that some of that work probably had not been done when he talked to us. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like on a Sunday game when we talk on Tuesday, he's done a lot more work for Wednesday's practice than he had today after a Sunday game. So like things like who may or may not be participating on Wednesday, if let's say Larry was out there for practice on Friday a little bit. They marked him as a DNP, but he was like moving around and doing stuff and that kind of thing. Actually participated in some individual drills. Like if Larry's going to practice Wednesday, maybe he would have given it that to us, but like that's about it. So I mean, I wrote them down as 6 questionables. We'll see what happens. That's about the best I got.
I guess to your point, kind of going along with that, if there is a silver lining, again, would he tell us if anybody was out? Probably not, but nobody ruled out today. That's at least hopefully good news. The other good news is like with the way that it looked yesterday for TJ right off the bat, I know that there was like a lot of gasps and a lot of people holding their breath, and reasonably so. So I guess it's good news that it's like not even like we don't even know for sure he's going to miss one game potentially after the way that it looked yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, again though, like would we know more? I don't know. I it's why I hesitate to like Russ got hurt on Thursday and then we found out he was questionable on Saturday and then he missed 5 weeks. Like I just I don't know like yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it just seemed like the vibes, like especially like TJ talking afterwards to reporters and stuff like that, just seemed like I don't know. It just seemed like the vibes were relatively high, all things considered.
I'll say certainly like as I said last night, like compared to Alex Highsmith's injury, like not even compare, even though both are a low ankle sprain, not even comparable in terms of severity. So I think TJ, and like he can play on a that's a position where you can play a limited role too also. But I the other part of this is there's plans, there's subterfuge and obfuscation about what the plans are, and then there's like, oh, what happens when things don't go according to plan? Like you go out there and try to practice to see if you can do it, and then you heard it again, or maybe it doesn't feel as good as you thought it was going to. That's one of the reasons why Tomlin's very careful, even when he thinks he knows what's going to happen, about hedging in these conversations, because a lot of times what you think is going to happen on Monday is not what ends up happening on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see. How many of these guys.
I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a player in the locker room on Wednesday, be like, "I'm going to play this week."
Well, it just happened with Mont Adams, right?
Play. Like it happens all the time, to the point where like I kind of like, I don't even know if I want to report that. Like we'll see. Like it happens all the time where players are like, yeah, I'm definitely gonna play, and then they don't. Like stuff happens. So we'll see.
We just had Mont Adams the week at Cleveland say he was going to play and then not return until the following week. So there you go.
Yeah.
As it relates to Tomlin, though, I wanted to bring this up. Obviously, like I just mentioned, Saturday's game against the Ravens. We'll see how many of those guys, if any, we can get back. Tomlin's record in division clinching games. Wanted to bring this up. Shout out to Birchie's Bits for the info here. Tomlin 6-1, 3-0 against the Ravens when they can clinch the division with just by winning their own game there. That's what can happen on Saturday. The Steelers will win the AFC North if they defeat the Baltimore Ravens. Again, 6-1 in general, 3-0 against the Ravens. Is that one of those things? We've been talking about like a lot of historical context recently within these games, whether it was Russ against Philly going into yesterday's game, the Steelers' history in Philly, the Steelers' history with the Browns coming to Pittsburgh. Like excluding the postseason, the Browns haven't won here in how long? Is this something that you think you can definitely like read into, or is this meaningless information?
Man, I don't know. It's such a weird sample.
Yeah.
Obviously, like none of the players that are on the field this week were on any of those teams. Maybe. When was the last one?
2020.
Okay, so some of these guys
against
won.
Indy. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that one. Okay, so Cam, TJ, Boz, Cam Sutton, Matakevich, maybe.
Highsmith.
Highsmith, yeah, Highsmith, yeah. I would just much rather lean on their very good recent record against the Baltimore Ravens. Like, I think that's a lot better signal here than this sort of disjointed sample about division clinching scenarios. I talk about it the same way I talk about like your record in the playoffs. Like, winning a game in which you're going to clinch the division is not any more or less difficult than winning any other game. It is not. There's no secret recipe to winning those games that they can apply going forward. It is just football. You win the football game the same as you win every other football game. So no, I don't think I really pay very much attention to things like this. Yeah, I mean,
well, I like your point though about just the recent success against the Ravens in general, because very clearly that shows that they've had a game plan for them recently that they've been very successful deploying.
Yeah. I mean, that to me is actionable, right? Where you have like an actual trend of, styles make fights. Like the way teams line up against each other matters. Some teams, even though they're really good, and the Baltimore Ravens are really good, just do not handle certain opponents well. Certain opponents, even though they're maybe not as good, do really well against certain types of teams. It can be X's and O's. It can be personality. It can be similarities. Whatever it is, the Steelers do pretty well against the Ravens. I like that. That to me means a lot more than what was it? 6-1 in division.
6-1 in general, and 3-0 versus the Ravens specifically. Yeah, division clinching games.
Yeah, I mean, I would even. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like the Steelers doing well against the Ravens is really all you need to know there.
Yeah. I want to turn the
especially when it's like not like you clinch the division by beating the Colts. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Yeah, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to turn the attention back to the offense. This is a question from our guy Chop, supporter of the show for a long time, basically since we started doing it. So shout out to him. Why can't we run the ball? Obviously, the numbers on the surface look okay, but if you look at the efficiency, it's not there. Seems like they have some tells with what is coming in personnel choices and formations. Pretty clear if you line up with no 14, 18, 19, or 88 on the field, you're not going to give the look that you were passing out of that.
Yeah, I mean, they've done it, though. Like, they've thrown out of that many times, in fact.
Yeah. I remember there was a third, and it was in Cleveland. It was like a 3rd and 18 where none of those guys were on the field, and they threw out of it.
There was one in Washington where I think it was Michael Pruitt and Ben Skoranek was the only receiver on the field, and they were both wide open. Like the Commanders were like, we were told not to cover these guys. I was under the impression they were not going to be out here. I don't know what you want me to do. You said don't worry about it, and now here they are. So like they have thrown out of it, and obviously 3rd and 18 is a bit extreme, but like 3rd and medium, I mean, it's perfectly reasonable. I think the predictability of the Steelers offense has been very, very overstated. They ran a flea flicker, by the way, in this game. I don't know if anybody saw that. And the other part about like what looks like predictability, maybe sometimes, is that a lot of what's happening is Russ at the line of scrimmage. And so like you're going to build in a bunch of like check 2 plays, a bunch of plays that are like easy to call against the defense that you're expecting to see a lot. And so like that doesn't make them bad. Like if you line up and you look at the way the other teams lined up and you say this play should have a tactical advantage, it doesn't matter if that's predictable. It should there's times I sit in the press box and you're like, oh man, like Jamar Chase just got himself on Beanie Bishop. He's probably going to throw it to Chase. That being predictable doesn't make it a bad idea. That makes a very good idea. And so, like the toss play that everybody hates, like it's just a run. I mean, it's not any different if you hand it off. I don't. I guess.
Oh, it's the new jet sweep because they haven't been as successful. And now we lost a fumble. Najee loses his first fumble of the season on it as well. So now,
meanwhile, like they've had plenty of very good toss runs this year, like very good.
Najee's touchdown against the Raiders.
Yeah, it was like a 37-yarder. They won the game with one against the Browns. That's been a really good play for them all year. People hate it. It's like the dumbest thing in the world. I don't get it. But just look at the team. Like they have a really athletic tackle lined up next to Darnell Washington. Like that kind of run just sort of makes sense for what they have. Like and good blocking wide receivers, so I don't get the hatred for it. I really defy, like, predictability is like the laziest notion to me out there, because like if they're like everybody only says they're predictable after the fact. It's always just like 100%. Oh, it's not working, so it must be predictable. I don't. If I'm starting to line up the list of issues with the Steelers versus the Eagles, nothing involving coaching makes the top 10 for me.
From what I watched back today, I think it's a very different conversation if they didn't have the amount of just complete whiffs and gaffes that they did with the offensive line. I mean, I don't know if it was just miscommunication. I don't know what was going on at times, but there's like a bunch of plays where it seems like Isaac Seumalo and Broderick Jones aren't even running like the same play as everybody else. Like they're doing two different things. They're not all on the same page.
There was a lot of, but that's what happens when you just play a really good team. Like there's a play DB pointed out on Twitter today where like Broderick Jones just obviously whiffs, and then you start to look at it a little more, like the Eagles are in a defense that just does not make any sense. They're in an alignment that like no one would ever intentionally align, and then like they take the guy who should be lined up right over Broderick Jones, and they moved him 5 yards back, and like now he has to be like, wait, which one of these is mine? And like when you have really good defenses, you can do stuff like that, and that's a really good defense. They have really good players.
And I think that's part of it too. I mean, you have to tip your cap to what they have on the defense. That's why I said, like, first month of the season, they were figuring it out, and look where they're at now. I think that's what kind of separates them from me in the NFC, is how good they are on the defensive side, as opposed to, and a lot of it's due to injuries, but Detroit just keeps getting dismantled with injuries. So if I'm picking an NFC favorite right now, it's now Philly over Detroit, which it wasn't a few weeks ago.
Yeah. I think I might think Philly is the overall Super Bowl favorite, just because I think they have the easiest path to the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom of the NFC is not very good at all.
No. I want to get to a couple more things here. Actually, because this is a first, Alan, unless you've gotten some that you've pulled from there, but I certainly haven't. Question from Blue Sky here. From Chris Nestrick, who has been watching or listening as well for quite a bit, and we've always appreciated his support. 2 questions, but they're unrelated, so I'll bring them up separately. Broderick Jones has talked about this a little bit. Thoughts on just leaving him at right tackle when you get Troy Fautanu back in the fold. You have Mason McCormick playing next to Broderick. Troy takes over at left tackle when healthy. I think a 77 and 66 were made for each other to play side by side, just from a mentality standpoint. Yeah,
I think so. That's funny because I was riding back from Philly, good friend Nick Farabaugh hitched a ride with me and Ed, and I was in the back seat, and we were talking about this, long term, Isaac Seumalo getting up there, the sort of last older member of this offensive line, once you include Fautanu getting into the mix next year. And I was just thinking like about the draft, and like, would you draft would you draft a player who had to be a guard, or would you consider drafting a tackle just to give yourself some like wiggle room if things don't work out with one of the two tackles you got, because both of those guys I think would be like potential. Hey, you could maybe move them to guard if the play doesn't turn out the way we think it will. But yeah, I mean, I think they have a really good young offensive line. It's a young offensive line. Like, if you're writing off offensive linemen at 23, you're doing it wrong. These guys are going to play for a long time. It takes a long time for them to get good. The fact that like these young guys have been playing together and the line hasn't been a total disaster is a really, really good sign. Like, it's a really good sign.
I think the return on investment for Mason McCormick and Zach Frazier in year one has been much more than I expected. I thought Frazier would be a good player right away, but he's been better than I expected. And certainly Mason McCormick, for a 4th-round guy, I didn't even expect to see this year, barring injury. One of those injuries does take place and he has to step in. And I think he's been better than I would have anticipated. And then Broderick starting to look more and more like the player that I thought that we were getting largely. So yeah, I mean, I think that they're probably still, and you get Troy Fautanu back in the fold. Maybe they are still like a piece away and then the time together away from doing this. But certainly, I guess the question is like, how early are you talking about adding another piece to it? When you start like checking boxes for needs here, we've talked about receiver, we've talked about the defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I would just like, would drafting another offensive lineman this coming year be too premature? I don't think so.
No,
like,
no. You could talk me into the trenches every single draft.
If you get into a situation where you think a tackle or a guard is best player available, I think I would do that. Yeah.
All right, real quick, the last thing that we wanted to get here. Again, this is completely unrelated, but certainly not somebody that we've talked about on the staff too much. What do we make of the impact of Tom Arth on the quarterbacks? Obviously, Arthur Smith has a hand. Seems like he was a very good hire from what I can tell. And actually, I hold high regard for what the job the entire staff has done. What have you made of Tom Arth?
I don't. I kind of look at it like this. I don't get the sense that Russell Wilson needs a lot of that kind of coaching. Like, he's a been there, done that guy. Not to say that like certainly like Tom Arth can't work with him on some things, but like what is Tom Arth going to teach Russell Wilson at this point?
Did we maybe see it earlier in the season when Justin was playing?
That's where I'm at. Like, I think like when you look at the Justin Fields that the Steelers got and how different it was than the Justin Fields that the Bears got in terms of like minimizing the turnovers and the negative plays. Yeah. Like, I think that points to Tom Arth being a really good quarterbacks coach. I don't know that I can put a whole lot about what Russell Wilson is doing on coaching. I assume that players like that don't really need coaches.
I agree, but that's what my mind actually went to Justin first and foremost when I saw
100%.
this question, because we talked, about how sure he's not playing right now. And the biggest reason that they were 4-2 was despite him obviously probably turning down throws and just not getting the most out of the passing game, what he was doing with his legs and importantly, not turning the football over, which bit him in Chicago a ton. And I think that the growth in that area does point back to what Tom Arth did with him.
Saw that Rex Ryan said that Justin Fields should start, which I just can only assume means that Rex Ryan did not watch the game. And so like that's kind of all I've got there.
Rex Ryan wants to get back into he said he's always would take the opportunity to get back into being a head coach. Maybe he's trying to posture to go somewhere and have Justin Fields as a starter for agency. I don't know. Yeah, I don't have an idea that makes sense more than
Justin,
that right
I've always believed in you, even when it was clear that Russ was the only sensible option for the Steelers. I said should be you.
I don't want to.
Even when you were hurt and actually could not even play, I was still calling for you to start. Come sign with me on the Jaguars.
Oh man, I don't want to completely turn this episode on its head right before we get out of here. But maybe he just has a great appreciation for what Justin does with his feet.
I mean, it's well done. It's well done.
Appreciate it. All right. Before we get out of here, and on that note, Alan, tell the people they can find you.
my bed for like 12 hours here very shortly.
Nice.
Had a Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now, the site's account on all those places. SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the word so I can get paid. Like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel so you don't miss any of this.
Yeah, this is exactly what you want. This Morning Rush, Steelers Spotlight, all the sights and sounds, interview stuff in the locker room, more content that you can account for. Be sure to hit that notification bell, when anything gets posted. Also, leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. If you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, search Steelers Afternoon Drive and you'll find us there. Do the same thing on TikTok, and then you'll find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.